I can actually see this time. I can't believe it. First of all, let's give a hand. What about my mad maestro over here? That's Thiago Nascimento, if you didn't know. Thiago's been with me on all three of my shows this year, which I'm happy to say have all three been full, and that's because of wonderful people like you. So I just want to say that. How many of you, anybody here has seen all three shows? You need rehab. I just have two or three things that I want to just cover real quickly before we sort of settle in, because I hope you're in the mood to have a fun ride tonight, because I've really looked forward to taking you on this one. And I think we all need a good scare because it's been such a boring news week. So I do appreciate, and I really want to ask right now, and I don't mean to be, but please turn the phones off. On the last show, phone went off 30 seconds into the first story. And fortunately, I do not have a concealed handgun permit, even though it would certainly work well for this show. I'm going to take you on quite a ride on the first act, but the second act is deadly. No pun intended. It's a killer. So refresh yourself during intermission and for the second act. I want to talk to you a little bit about how this came about. First of all, my background is just that. When I was a little boy, I remember the first time I ever truly, really fell in love with a movie on my own, independent of anyone, was when I saw the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi. And when I saw that window open and she's sleeping there and the bat comes through and it's all shot in such beautiful black and white, I loved that. And then I also loved the film noir movies of the 40s. And even though I was born in the 40s, I really didn't come of age until the 50s. But I loved that film noir. And then we had television. And before we had television, though, we had radio, and I had only caught the tail end of the radio era. But in the radio era, they had murder mysteries. They were suspense, it was called. Another one was The Whistler, where it started off with him whistling, and you'd listen to it in the dark. And all of these things, The Shadow. So all of that was very exciting to me, but it didn't seem to be as exciting to other people. And then Mother was a book reviewer, and she was a voracious, just like my sister is, a voracious reader of murder mysteries. Even though she had read Shakespeare at 5, she just read murder mysteries constantly. My sister still does, like other people do trail mix. They just do murder mysteries. So there were all these murder mysteries lying around, and of course in the 50s they were all so, mysterious looking, very tabloid looking, with a woman like this, and the monsters coming toward her. So I loved all of that, but I never really dreamed, of course, that I was going to actually have those stories. Oh, but I do. And then, most importantly, the original Alfred Hitchcock TV series. That replays at night now, and it inspired the show for me because he never showed gore. There was always a murder, always. There was maybe 2 that didn't have a murder, and it was always so unexpected you never knew what was going on. I just loved it. And then, it went on. Then my most favorite became One Step Beyond, which I think a lot of people don't remember. They remember The Twilight Zone, and then later some of the others, but not the. But One Step Beyond was always about paranormal things happening, or ordinary people somehow having something highly unlikely happen. And God knows I've got those stories. So, one last thing, couple things. In my warm up with you, is that my mother had many friends independent of her marriage, and one of them was a man named Harry McCormick, who was the crime reporter for the Dallas Morning News, and he is legendary. For 30 years he was there, and his archives are in the Dallas Library, and you have to really check them out to read them. But he would come over and smoke cigarettes after midnight with Mother, and they would drink, and I would listen to him talk, and he knew every underground figure there was. He knew all the underbelly of what was going on, and that's how I knew about Jack Ruby and people like that long before the Kennedy assassination. But I never butted in, but I was so fascinated and intrigued. I just didn't realize that when I grew up, I was going to see all that. And I want to thank you tonight before we begin, because here's what this has meant to me. I don't live in the past, so I don't think about these stories that have happened to me. You know, I don't take them out. I know that they're there, just like you know that there's Christmas decorations in the attic, and you bring them out at some time. But I don't have occasion to think about them. And then all of a sudden now I was bringing all these stories out and laying them out and just going, really? Who's going to believe that? Well, now, there's more. The first hand I ever had of, let's say, where things can take a twist was my best friend, Edward. He was first generation German, and Edward and I would play cowboys and Indians. And of course, we all had rubber tomahawks. And then one day I realized at 11 that he had just stricken me with a hatchet. And I thought, well, that's an upgrade, but that's not really, you know. I looked and I'm bleeding. I thought, really? An axe? And then another time, I was 13 years old. I was 13 years old, seriously, and I'm running a paper ball. You know, I've got a paper route. And I break my pencil by accident or something, and just like, you know, in the movies, how in the Westerns, how they always, like, throw the gun down when it's, like, out of bullets. Well, I mean, the pencil broke, and I threw it over my shoulder, and it flew through the window and hit a woman in a passing car. And so the guy makes a screeching, turns around and comes back and puts a gun right in my face, a revolver. And I said, I'm telling you, I'm not going to say this, but once. I'm not making this stuff up. Any of this tonight, I don't care. So the guy sticks the gun in my 13-year-old face, and I go, is that a gun? And he goes, just like, I swear to God, he says, what are you, stupid? I mean, I've heard that in movies many times. What are you, stupid? Yeah, well, you know. But yes, I thought, well, so that was my first gun. And then I went from a Leave It to Beaver grade school, which was Bonham School on Henderson over in East Dallas, and then was sent to Spence Middle School. Well, that was like somehow growing up on the beach and then being sent to a correctional institute. Because even my sister had gone there 5 years before me, had like the female Latinas gang members after her. But I became like suddenly the sainted rabbit that they were after. And they always came to school with the switchblades, which, you know, with the blade would pop out, and it would be a 5-inch blade or a 7-inch blade, depending on who was the thing. And no one ever did a shakedown. There'd been at the Howdy Dance at the 8th grade. At the Howdy Dance, they called it. The lights went out and somebody stabbed David Rivera. They take him away. They didn't even end the dance. It was never in the paper. It was so bizarre. So I thought, really? The Howdy Dance? So they were after me, and they were capable of killing people, and they had. But it was in that part of town, so everybody played Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But so they would wait for me after school, and the only thing I could think to do was I realized the entire school's empty. It's all open. There's just cleaning crews somewhere or something. There was no security of any kind. I mean, that is just, woo. And I would see them waiting for me, and then finally when they realized I hadn't exited, they started coming in. And when they did, I realized that they were coming for me. And the only option I had was to hide in a locker. So I would get in a locker, And I would pull it to, and I would have something. I'd already rehearsed this, so I knew how, I could get out. I wouldn't be locked in. But I would be in this locker, and I could hear them coming now. And they'd open, slam, open, slam, open, slam. Closer, 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 closer to me, closer, closer. Until finally, they stopped when they got almost to me. They gave up. But I knew right then that any second I might have a 5 or 7 inch stiletto in my stomach, point blank when you're inside a locker. So that was kind of an early introduction to terror. Now, I want to cover real quickly before I absolutely dive in here. I used to not tell people these stories about people trying to kill me because they always turned it around on me like, oh, well, you must attract that. It's karma. You have a death wish. I'm going, I don't have enough fingers to shoot up how many times I heard all that. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to explain to you what I've learned about murder. That there are several reasons that people try to kill other people, and I'm going to be covering them all in these stories because every time somebody would try to kill me, I'd realize, oh, that falls under that category. It was a learning curve, but But as I was putting these shows together, I realized here, I've got it. I'd witnessed a murder and been taken hostage and left for dead and turned 21 as the sole witness in a murder trial, which anybody who was at my last show knows that story, but that's not in this one. But that, because none of these stories are quite like that one. You will hear tonight how I actually planned a murder. I didn't do one, but I actually have planned a murder, and you will certainly join in and understand why. And I have been a murder suspect, even though I have not ever murdered anyone, although I'm certainly grateful that others have. And I also helped somebody get away with murder, and I have to explain that. It was a woman that came to me in the 80s when I was dressing people as the head of personal shopping for Neiman Marcus. I was doing the Dallas TV series, and also that was just what I was doing, And this woman came to me, and she was going on trial for murdering her husband. And I turned to her, and I said, basically, did you do it? And she said, he made me get down on my knees every night, on all fours every night, and he would beat me with a whip and make me bark like a dog. And I said, well, I would have killed him. And so I figured she did. And I dressed her to look like a virgin pilgrim. A little bit like Britney Spears in that, hit me baby one more time video, And she got off. Now, we're almost there, but here are the reasons people kill you. It falls under the category of it's nothing personal. It falls under the category of it's a sport. And it goes under the category of people who are certifiably murderers, which are the most undesirable ones. You can almost work with some of the others, But here's how I have these stories, and off we go, okay? I have the stories because if you heard that story in the first show, you know that really wasn't something other people would have seen. I was driving after midnight in an ice storm, and I happened to see something that looked peculiar. Other people probably wouldn't have noticed. After all, it was 31 degrees and freezing mist. Then, other people, if they maybe did see something that looked a little odd, like somebody maybe had gone off the road, they might not have stopped. They probably wouldn't have stopped and then investigated. I did, and unfortunately it had negative consequences. Yeah. Since I woke up the next morning, stark naked in frozen mud, but picky. But it was not because of all kinds of negative things. It was because I actually noticed things other people didn't, and I acted on them. And I've acted on things I've noticed many times without somebody trying to murder me. Now, the other thing is that I actually go places. I have a motto that I'm never the one that almost went. Like, for instance, The day that Kennedy came to Dallas with Jacqueline in 1963, I had this many friends who almost went with me, and I ended up going alone, as I so often do, because they almost went. So I happened to be saluting the president, and he nodded and smiled at me maybe 15 feet from me, 45 seconds before he died. I was there because I actually went instead of almost went. And the thing is, I go places and then wonder why I went rather than don't go places and wonder why I didn't. So sometimes that has consequences. And then the last one is serendipity. Sometimes interesting things happen to people, and I'm hoping you're going to think that maybe tonight you'll hear some examples of that. Are you ready? I can tell you right now, when I looked at these stories, I thought, really, Rollins? How did you live to tell these stories? And then I looked over here and I said, but you did.